it's less than practical. It's as the studies have shown, it's physically possible to do it, but a couple things to think about, or things that I think about on it. First one is, of course, is just maybe not the most important, but it's just the aesthetics of having a road cut and lights and headlights going up and down the mountain right across from our beautiful in our view space here. I think there's something wrong with that. Yeah, I mean, it would be offensive to the people that love to look around and the people that visit our area and love it for how beautiful it is. Of course, there's a need, and that need needs consideration, but not up on the side of the mountain is my feeling. Been up there and tromped around as other people have and know what it looks like. I know how rough parts of it are, and the access is quite rough, as you know. The study shows that the roads are over a mile long at a reasonable grade, and a reasonable grade means half the year it's going to take plowing and sanding and real care to have people come up and down something like that. The other thing that kind of puzzles me about when they show the first part of the subdivision, there's a lake up there. There's a lake over 500 feet long, a nice little lake. It looks like they put some of the first lots right where the lake was, so I don't know why that doesn't seem to be considered. But I'm not really going to get into the whole wetlands thing. I don't really have a lot of information about that. The roads they talk about, you can see on the maps that they do cross some ravines. There's some nasty ravines in there that I've crawled through myself, and it's not just a matter of scratching a road. It's bridging or huge culverts or something to make that work. They talk about the blasting. It would be quite a deal to build those roads. Total development for the roads, they talk about $60 million, and that, of course, is a guess. As far as a tsunami retreat or a tsunami safety area, that's a little bit out there. I think the entire high part of Nash Road, of course, is a place to hide out if people needed a place to get to. There wouldn't be any development, but I know when we were building the prison, am I getting close to my time already?
Yeah, that's your 3 minutes.
Holy smoly.
There will be time at the end also, though.
Okay, okay. I guess I should just say quickly that it's extremely expensive, and to have a quarter-acre lot for between $170,000 and $200,000 just for the bare ground, who's doing that? I don't know who's doing that. So,
Okay,
thank you for listening. I appreciate
you.
the chance to talk.
Next,
Next on the list is Karen Corrigan.
Karen? Same routine, name and inside or outside, even though we know you.
Karen Corrigan, 203 Van Buren Street, inside city limits. I'm surprised that the estimated cost per lot is basically $200,000. This cost for only a lot puts this area outside of the reach of the normal working citizens of Seward. Even me, having 20 years working in the public service sector, would not be able to afford to even buy a lot. Forget about building a house on it. We all know this cost will be more than this when the project actually comes to fruition, probably double if the subdivision goes forward. However, my concern is that this money being spent for now for the studies may be for show only. If housing really was a true concern of the council, then why is housing not on your legislative priorities list? Making housing your #1 priority, the city should not need more boat slips for people that do not live in this town year-round. We need more housing. Move this project forward as quickly as possible and get it on your legislative priority list. There are monies out there, just like there are monies out there for harbor expansions. Please also remember, with a subdivision of this size, a fire station and additional commercial businesses should be planned for inside the subdivision. Your fire department is volunteer. The stations are not manned. Putting a fire station below the subdivision would greatly increase the time of response to any emergencies or fire in the area. Volunteers would have to take precious moments to drive down the hill to the industrial area below a proposed location to retrieve the emergency vehicles, to only spend those same precious moments to drive back up. A school space isn't the only service needed. Make sure emergency services are also given a priority space inside the subdivision. Let's keep Seward moving forward and growing. Don't let this project stall out. And keep finding ways to let locals purchase lots at affordable rates. Don't let this subdivision, which should be renamed to Alice Subdivision, turn into an out-of-town, state-owned housing used for nightly rentals only. Remember your citizens first. Thank you.
Thank you. And who's next?
Next on the list is Carol Griswold.
Carol?
Carol Griswold, Inside City Limits. R&M has been sitting on this feasibility study for a long time. Why are we just now receiving the 2 laydowns at 4 p.m. before this 5:30 meeting? I grabbed a few minutes to look at laydown 2, presumably the presentation. I couldn't open the fly-through, but it seemed like an attempt to fire the imagination with blue sky and downplay the obvious and serious drawbacks: steep slopes, bedrock, wetlands, elevation, extreme weather, no utilities, high maintenance, hazardous roads, etc. This feasibility study does not need refinement or authorization for more detailed design work. Too much taxpayer money has already been spent. I didn't love the design. The best change for Lot 7, Block 2 is to leave it as nature designed it. The 3D visualization of the tidy white houses basking in the sunshine in the partial build-out is a desecration. Good luck growing green lawns on bedrock at 700 to 1,000 feet elevation. Good luck growing anything with extreme weather and winds. The charming graphic does not show the required water storage tanks, the overhead electric lines, sewer and water pipes carrying effluent downhill and water uphill, the scars on the mountainside from snow machine tracks. The remaining build-out shows roads over the remaining wetlands and kettle ponds, and the site of the unsolicited school tsunami evacuation center smack in the middle of more wetlands. The terrain is increasingly steep and hilly as it ascends Mount Alice. All 674 lots must be sold to bring the price down to a whopping $199,639 per lot. This price does not include the cost of upgrading the SMIC sewage lagoon and water system, or road maintenance, Nash Road improvements, and other associated expenses to be paid for continually, forever, by the citizens of Seward. Pull the plug. This is not a feasible subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you. And next.
Next on the list is Tim McDonald.
Thank you.
Wow. I'm not going to say anything about that. I will mention that
Tim?
right next,
Could you state your name and,
excuse me, Tim McDonald, Inside City Limits.
thank you.
I live on Nash Road. The Peter Lewis Darling property of, I forget the exact acreage, but it's a lot. It's in excess of 150 acres is right next, and they're selling that presumably for development also, so that's just something to consider. I want to talk about the utility. You know, we've had a couple executive sessions, secret meetings for the utility, and I think it's the most important issue that we've faced in 20 years. Selling the utility to a third party is monetizing us. You know, they're not just selling that infrastructure and the right to buy electricity from Chugach and a couple of diesel generators. They're monetizing the customer base and adding it to a conglomerate. We're being monetized. And I think that there's too much going on behind closed doors, and that you guys are already whipping out a deal and it's come out as de facto already done and nobody's had time to discuss it. I really think the only way to go right now, because of all the opportunities, you know, in the new technologies that are coming on, that you know, now they're figuring out excuse me, how you can make batteries out of sandbanks. You know, I mean, it's a complicated thing, but basically they don't need the the ultra rare minerals anymore, and storage capacity we don't have. You know, Seward as a city has never let anybody put any windmills or anything else into the grid to do their thing, and I think we need that opportunity to do that, and the only way we can do that is a co-op for ourselves, monetize ourselves, and, you know, we can run it exactly the way it's being running for a couple of years till we figure out the best way to go, but there's so much happening right now with this stuff, it's stupid to throw it all away where all we're gonna do is pay more rates and have less control. That's basically, if you guys sell the utilities, and this utility has belonged to the city of Seward for, you know, God knows how long, 40 plus years. And I don't think it's right at all that this is doing this. This is, you know, you don't represent those people outside of city limits. They're not your voters. You're selling them out along with us too. And we need, if anything comes up, we need the question about having an auxiliary vote for the users to have a co-op. That is our best way to protect our interests as utility rate users, keep the price down. And also, you guys aren't talking enough. Everybody's no comment, no comment. Your job is to have an opinion.
Thank you, Tim. That's all that have signed in. Does anyone else want to speak at this time? Raise your hand. Come on up. State your name and in and out, or out of the city limits.
Hi, Laura Schneider, very happily inside city limits. My house is done. I love it. It's really nice to have a house. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to the council for approving this feasibility study and for taking the time to review it. To be honest, looking at the results, the numbers are a bit daunting. But I think that this is the momentum that we need. We keep talking about housing's the problem, and I feel like we're finally doing something. So I really appreciate that. So I wanted to say, I don't have a strong opinion either way yet. I'm looking forward to hearing more. I do think there's a lot of federal dollars out there to help bring that cost down. I know that 199 is a really scary number, but that's also a break-even number. And as a city, we don't always have to break even. Sometimes we do things to like make our community better. And for Seward to grow and for us to get more Coast Guard presence here, and if we want to get that icebreaker, like there has to be places for people to live. I also think there's some really great opportunities for recreation on Alice by putting those roads in, to have a trail system, to maybe have some ski trails in there, or to have some fat biking trails. There's ways to develop that and still have it be public use land where people can appreciate and enjoy it. So again, I'm not here to say one way or the other, but again, I just appreciate the direction that we're headed in, and I hope that if this isn't the solution, that we find one. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Is there anyone else that wants to speak at this time? Okay, Linda, come on up.
Linda Paquette, outside city limits. I also want to say thank you for doing this because as a PACAB member, we did a whole inquiry into what the issue was with employee retention in Seward, and housing was the #1 issue. The one thing that I don't think this study did, that I still think we need done, is to have a number. How many homes, new homes, do we actually need? Right? We need to get that number, because at this point, we're just, you know, let's say we do that, and then that all is filled up, and then it's still a housing desert. And then so, you know, I just feel like there's a piece of this planning and figuring out that we've skipped, and I would like to see, I don't think it would be that expensive. I mean, I actually think you could do it through a survey of the community, to send it to all the employers in town and say, you know, how many of your employees need housing, and what's that number? It can be a range. You know, if you were to ask me, I'm outside the city and I provide my own housing, but, you know, I have potentially 3 people I would need to house. Everybody weigh in on that. Now we have a number, we know what we need to meet so that we can have the people that we need. How many Coast Guard people is it? I mean, is that whole hillside going to end up being Coast Guard? So that's my input. And again, thank you for doing this, because we do have a problem. And when when you're in government, you have to think in 30 to 50 years. You can't just be thinking, the next couple of years. This is like a major problem, and I appreciate that you're putting attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Is there anyone else? Okay, come on up and state your name and inside or outside the city limits, please.
Hi, I'm Kirk Sermia. I currently live on Nash Road, but I've lived in and out of the city over the last 20 years. I admittedly don't know a lot about this, and I want to commend Carol for actually posting it on social media where most people look for this type of information. Kind of surprised that I didn't see it otherwise. But I think, at first glance, and again, there's a lot I don't know yet, admittedly, but there's a lot I don't like right off the bat about it in terms of just big new development in pristine forest and the scenic value that's lost to the city as a whole, to tourism, to all of the residents who've lived here for many years, and myself. But probably one of the most frightening things that I'm thinking about are my kids and Nash Road, and we're looking at 670-something lots. If you put, 2 vehicles in each one of those houses, you're looking at 1,200 plus cars up and down Nash Road. Probably at least twice a day. If it's like they're dropping kids off, it's probably 3 or 4 times a day. And I just think about how that road is already really dangerous for people to walk on, to ride bikes on, to be near it 55 miles an hour with like no shoulders. Tourists stop on the lake called Swan Lake at the curves to take pictures. And I've seen a lot of close calls there, but let's think about that as we're talking about a project that adds, 12 to 1,500 cars on the road multiple times a day, and also the traffic that's going to happen in a project where we're actually doing development. How many big trucks and construction vehicles and all that goes into that. So those are a couple of the points. I think there's a lot more devil in the details and the costs. Looking at some of the stuff that I've read from Carol, it seems pretty wild and crazy. And I guess the last thing I would say is I don't really follow closely to everything that goes on here, admittedly, but I'm just curious if we're doing a feasibility study on a housing development in one spot. Have we looked at other, like a feasibility for housing for the entire Seward community? Like, where is the best spot? What might make most sense? Is that maybe a better approach than just saying, let's try it here because we have land access here? So that's all I have for right now.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, at this point, I would need a motion to approve the agenda and the consent agenda, and a second.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda and the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about that? Mr. Acting Clerk, could we take a vote on that, please?
Okay, voting on the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. Osenga.
Yes.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Wells.
Yes.
Granda.
Yes.
DeMoss.
Yes.
And McClure.
Yes.
Okay, the agenda and consent agenda are approved. We have no items on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. So our only item of new business is to go into a committee of the whole to discuss the SMIC bench draft development feasibility study, actually to be presented by that study. And I need a motion and a second to go into that committee of the whole.
I'll make a motion to go into committee of the whole.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, Mr. Acting Clerk, we're ready to vote on that.
Okay, voting on going into a committee of the whole. Osenga.
Yes.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Casagrande.
Yes.
DeMoss.
Yes.
Wells.
Yes.
McClure.
Yes.
Okay, that motion has been approved.
Okay, I have a question for anybody that knows. Do I gavel us into a committee of the whole?
You can if you'd like to, you don't need to.
I don't need to.
The clerk notes the time.
5:52
Okay.
PM.
Okay, so we're now a committee of the whole. And as far as I'm concerned, what we need to do is see the presentation from the group that did the study. Is that okay with everyone?
Madam Acting Mayor?
Yes.
If I may make a comment. Just as you're going back in history a little bit, as it was sometime last year that I requested authorization to move forward with this feasibility study And the reason for doing so is on the medium land plan for 30 years. So, we needed to determine if the project is feasible. The answer is yes. However, it is obviously cost prohibitive, and there are other issues that you'll see and that we'll talk about. So the question has been answered. Will it move forward as a city priority? Most likely not at this time because of the cost, but there is the information for us to learn about what could be feasible at some point, but that's why the feasibility study came forward and this information is coming forward to you.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. All right, we're ready for your presentation, I believe. It's now about, well, sort of 10 minutes to 6, so we've got some time.
Right, excellent. Hello, everyone. My name is Taryn Olesanyel. I'm a planner with R&M Consultants, and I've been supporting the city and trying to figure out exactly the question we've all been discussing already today. And that is development on the Seward Marine Center bench, so that area above, is it doable? Is development up there even potentially on the table? And so that is what myself and my interdisciplinary team of primarily engineers and land surveyors have set out to answer. So we have quite a few professional eyes on this. Dave Hale is our land surveyor. He's the one who drew our preliminary concept design that's shown on the preliminary plat. And I'm hesitant to even call it that. It is very conceptual. We also were supported very strongly by Bob Pittner, who's our geotechnical engineer, a couple utility engineers, and 3 civil engineers who supported us with the transportation aspect of all of this. So we did a desktop analysis for this. I want to be clear, we did not send surveyors up onto the bench. We have not done an on-the-ground wetland delineation. We were looking at existing data sources. So that also includes some work that R&M has done in the past. We have some borehole work that was done on Nash Road at least a decade ago. So we are well aware that things may change, but rocks don't change that often. So we feel pretty confident in that data. And we looked at a lot of the most recent LiDAR data and topographic information available, as well as the publicly available hydro data. For cost estimates, we did look at bid tabs. So that's the local construction, estimates. And if there was not one for the city of Seward, we looked at Kenai Peninsula Borough and expanded it out as much as we could to get general costs for road construction, utility estimates, and the like. So again, just really want to stress, we're conducting a feasibility study. It's that big question of what if, and everything on our drawings is subject to change. We know that once you get people up on the ground, get a surveyor actually on site, line work can move around a lot, get wetland delineation data, and things will shift. So why did we conduct this feasibility study? As we heard, this city-owned parcel has been identified in the municipal lands plan for over 30 years for potential development, and no one's taken a hard look at it. And so that's what we were hired to do. We know that there's an ongoing housing crisis, and so housing was our #1 land use priority for looking at potential development, and that served as our primary basis for assumptions moving forward in the process. Again, we really want to just explore development opportunities within the city, and this is the largest city-owned parcel, and so it made sense to at least take a look at it and see what we could do. So this is an overview of the process that we took. Again, we started with a desktop analysis, so really mining all of that publicly available data and seeing what information we could find. We knew that we weren't going to look at the entirety of the SMIC bench parcel. It's really large. The city-owned parcel goes to the other side of the SMIC development and loops around. The total parcel is around 1,800 acres over that, and so we drew a conceptual preliminary boundary that included about 833 acres based on automatic no-go topography challenges. Ridge lines, very steep cuts. 4th of July Creek was a very natural boundary, and so we shrunk that down a bit. From there, we looked at planning level lot sizes. So we looked at City of Seward Development Code, seeing for what types of housing or other types of land uses, including commercial, institutional, what else could be there, what's an average lot size that we could work with to kind of plug and play and see what layout we could work with. We landed on 10,500 square feet as an average lot size. There's a couple reasons for that. The first is that it would accommodate R1, R2, and R3 zoning within city code limits. So single family, duplex, single family with an accessory apartment, as well as multifamily units. We did not go larger than that for the rural residential based on some information we got through step 1, which is that bedrock is very present on almost all of Smith Bench. Soil levels are really shallow. We're looking at about an average, we think, of about 5 feet of actual dirt before you're going to hit bedrock. And so with that, we knew right away that on-site sewer and water was going to be basically a no-go. There's unlikely to be an aquifer there that could support clean water, and to blast, to put in septic systems is just going to be even more costly than what we've already determined. So with that, we did not go larger on lot sizes yet, but just kind of seeing again, kind of Lego style, really plug and play with that 10,500 square foot lot size. From there, we needed to solve the biggest issue from our initial perspective, which was how do we get up on the bench? So physical access, how are we going to get a road up from Nash Road to the top of the bench? And then from there, it was playing with Legos. It was, here's the road alignment that's going to work the best. Now how can we get as many feasible lots within the steep slopes that are there to make work? And so that's how we ended up with the concept that is before you in this feasibility study. So just a little overview. I know almost everyone is very familiar with the location that we're talking about, but just in case, again, we're talking about that kind of plateau-looking area above the Sewer Marine Industrial Center. I keep saying complex because you guys got so much going on over there. It seems complicated. We've got the Spring Creek Correctional Center below it, and yeah, a lot of developing activity over there. Access is only via Nash Road, and the existing zoning is resource management, which is what city code uses for areas that we know are either, one, undevelopable or could be developable, but we know that there are limitations such as steep slopes. It also applies to a lot of our wetland areas here as well. So it's kind of a catch-all category for could preserve, but also we need a lot more information to figure out how this could work. Adjacent land uses, as you guys also know, it's mostly vacant land. We've got a lot of U.S. National Forest Service land to the north. The DNR has most of the land to the east, and then you've got your developed activity down on Smith. So again, this is what I was talking about before, about that really large parcel. It's kind of hard to tell, but if you follow the large parcel above 4th of July Creek, it does wrap all the way down and around. So that is all city-owned land. It's the largest piece of property the city owns, and we know that it's mostly shallow bedrock. So again, limitation number 1, really, really shallow bedrock. And we also know that there are very steep slopes. Getting up the bench is, again, the most difficult challenge that we had to go through. And then there are hydrology constraints as well. I'm glad that you mentioned the lake up there. We know that that's a constraint that may or may not be significantly limiting. Again, we threw it out there that the topography was saying that it's not a very deep lake, so we don't know if it's permanently there or if it's just sometimes there. Again, more investigation would tell that, and you know, any subdivision up there would adjust as we get that information. All right, big challenge number 1, access. We did find a primary way up the mountain that we are fairly confident in would be the route that if anyone decided to develop up here would be the route to go. The slopes are very, very steep, and we did stick to city code as well as Kenai Peninsula Borough Code, and that roads cannot exceed 10% slope or more. We really tried to keep it at 6% as much as we could, just to make it more comfortable to drive up and down. And we did adhere to that 4% within 100 feet of an intersection. So with that, we resulted in some switchbacks, and there will be blasting. Likely that's going to need to make this happen if it were to come to fruition. So additionally, with access, Kenai Peninsula Code requires that for any subdivision with more than 30 lots, you do need secondary access. And so that is the southern portion in orange that you see down there. We did use the city property as a constraint as well, so we were looking at slopes and trying to keep that access road all on city property as best we could. As we'll see later, we did make a 3D model for this, and that secondary access road will require even more blasting just because it has some hydrology constraints there, even more so than the initial road. The other big constraint is utilities. You know, we can't live anywhere if we don't have reliable water or electricity. And so we looked at 5 potential options for providing water utility up to any future development on the SMIC bench. The 2 highlighted in the presentation here in the blue and the orange are the 2 that we believe are most viable. Again, with the shallow bedrock, we think it's pretty unlikely that there's going to be a viable aquifer that would provide clean, safe drinking water for any development up there. And with just the fact that there is such shallow bedrock, drilling down to find a well is also unlikely. And so we looked at the 2 main options are either producing a high production capacity public groundwater well near existing city wells. So what that basically means is it's a long way of saying there's existing city wells that we know of off of Nash Road, and we would likely tap into one of those and expand it and pump the water up the hill. The second option, highlighted in orange, would be to connect to city water. And there already is an existing distribution network on Nash Road. And there's one in the SMIC bench area as well. A big piece to that would be looking at what the capacity of that existing network is, how much would it cost to upgrade that. We do have quantities generally estimated, but again, we're not entirely sure what the condition of the existing system is to tap into that. Either way, what we do know is that pumping stations are going to be required to get it up the hill. And what's nice about these 2 highlighted options as well is that it doesn't rely on a new water treatment plant facility, which was also another major consideration. And so the image on the screen here is the existing water lines, water and sewer lines that are in the SMIC area. The blue is water, green is sewer. And so we do know that there is existing pipe network there. And so with that, again, pumping stations are going to be needed to get it up the bench. And another consideration was, okay, great, we've got water up at the top. What happens if something breaks? What happens if a pump station goes down and we have people living up there, businesses operating? And so with that, we know we would need storage tanks as well to provide, we made the assumption up to 3 days emergency services, and that would also provide fire flow water. So we wouldn't have to be running water tanks from down below. They could tap into the water storage tank at the top. Utilities, we also need sewer. We need that wastewater collection system. And so again, wastewater treatment plant, there already is one. There's a sewage lagoon down at the prison site, pretty much near there. It manages all of their wastewater. So one option would be to look at potentially expanding that and tapping into that system. Otherwise, a public sewer collection system is alternatively recommended, and that would be maintained and operated by the city. Again, with that high shallow bedrock, we can't be putting in, realistically can't be putting in septic tanks up there. Electrical utilities. So there is overhead electrical already existing on Nash Road, and the plan would be to tap into that and extend it, likely following the same alignment as the roadway, try to maximize that need so we wouldn't have to do a lot more clearing, and especially with, again, the steep slopes on Nash Road, following that road alignment we're anticipating would be the best way to move forward with that. We, again, might need to upgrade that existing Nash Road network depending on how large the subdivision could be. We're not entirely sure of its condition and capacity at this moment in time, so more work would need to be done on that. We would recommend overhead electrical lines. City code does prefer underground, again, just with shallow bedrock, to be blasting and trying to bury with very little available ground cover, soil to cover that. Just wouldn't be feasible or likely worth the effort. So we landed on this concept design that you all have hopefully likely seen, and if not, you'll see momentarily. We really focused just on the topography limitations, taking that 10,500 square foot lot size and plugging and playing it into different alignments based on topographic constraints. So one of those was that no single lot has more than a 20% slope on it. So that was a big thing. We recognize that people can build into hillsides. You know, there's a lot of really wonderful creative design with that, but there's just some areas that it's a no-go. And so 20% was that number for us. We did plan on a site for a potential elementary school or tsunami evacuation site. Again, looking at that 834 acre parcel, so that's what's in orange on the screen there. The lots that you see on the screen are basically within the plateau region, that flatter area of the bench, and that's what we considered our developable space. We fit 674 lots in there on this conceptual design, which is a lot. That's a lot of lots. I didn't do subdivision layout, our land surveyors did, and then I comment and tell them what I like and don't like, which is a wonderful job of a planner, trying to merge everything together. And I was very surprised that we got that many lots on there, and it negated a school. When you have that many, even if they're all single-family houses, that's enough to require an elementary school up there. And so we made sure that we had a sizable parcel for that. We had also discussed with Jason and Stephen before about the need for a tsunami evacuation site on that side of town anyway. That conversation happened before our feasibility started, so it was in the back of our minds that there's currently no evacuation site for anyone working down at SMIC. There's not a feasible evacuation site for the prison. And the biggest concern with that is, as you all know, there's one bridge on Nash Road, and if a sizable earthquake event were to put the integrity of that bridge at risk, there's really no way out of there. And so this could potentially give you a high elevation route to evacuate to. And that large space for the school site would come with a parking lot and ideally space for people to congregate there. An additional benefit to that large site is potential parking for recreation areas. As we heard before, and we completely agree, it's beautiful up there. The access to public lands, if you're up on the bench, is quite frankly unmatched so far in this area. And so we know that this would be a popular destination for people to come and recreate, and that school site could serve as that parking. This concept design is completely flexible. Again, we made an assumption based on lot size for how many housing units we could fit, R1, R2, R3, all good to go with this lot size. But that doesn't mean it has to all be residential. It doesn't all have to be in those zoning districts. As we get more information, maybe finding public-private partnerships, different people express interest, get creative with how this could develop. You could zone certain areas for commercial, have a restaurant, have lodging up there, lots of opportunity. This feasibility study doesn't lock any of that in. We're just simply here to say we know that development could happen, and this is what it might look like. So again, we rolled with the housing because that is what we know is the biggest need in the city of Seward, and a flexible lot size. So this is a close-up that's kind of hard to see on the screen. It is available in the packet as well and will be posted online, but this is that 674 residential lots plus that large tract in the center for potential institutional use. What's nice about this graphic too is you can really see the topography on this. We did not change any of the grading. So all of those contour lines are based on the public data that we have. That's the most recent LiDAR data. So we tested our own assumptions with wonderful technology that we also have. So we have built a 3D visualization using a program called Infraworks, which is an engineering program that basically takes your AutoCAD, which is the program that engineers use to draw up all of their designs, and bring it to a 3D visualization of it to help us kind of conceptualize, scope, and scale a bit more. What's really great about the Infraworks model as well is that you can set your parameters for things. So we told it that we didn't want any roads with more than 10% slope with an ideal line work of 6%. We set a grading for it for the lots as well to kind of see how much cut and fill might be needed. And so the program highlighted issues if we had any in our design. We were able to fix that a little bit more. So this was almost our own way of dry running this concept a little bit more. So with that, we actually built a 3D fly-through of this. I have some assistance over here to escape the PowerPoint. And I know it's confusing, sorry. We will have a movie in a moment. No, okay. I got you. Oh, that's okay. No worries, no worries. Oh, let's get close anyway, so it's all good. There we go. No, get close on you, that's not your fault. So this is what we're looking at potentially for the northern access road. You can see all the brown there is material that's been blasted away from the mountainside in order to create a drivable grade. So you'll see here we did design for a 50-foot roadway per city code, and we did put very wide shoulders on it as well to accommodate utilities to follow the same corridor coming up. So we dropped some single-family houses. These are all using setbacks that are per city code. Some of them are quite a bit farther setback because we recognize that people are likely going to have snow machines, plows, boats, fun toys, but it also gives us space to put larger housing units on these lots as well. I'll also point out right now this is presenting a bit flatter than we recognize it would be. Again, Infraworks has kind of a set grading for certain things, and it's really difficult for us to tell it to set, to do a housing unit built into a slope, which we all know that we can do. The program just really limits us with that. So just know that this is quite a bit, I shouldn't say quite a bit, it's a little bit flatter than what it would be. We only put houses on what we're considering potentially phase one. That's a very loose term. We did that just based on the fact that we know we're over 30 lots, so we know we needed to get to that secondary access road, so we built out the model between those two access points. We're looking at the southern access road. Again, blasting is more likely than not. It will be needed. I'll just go for it. It will be needed. I think from this angle too, you can really see the plateau area on the bench and a little bit of the elevation gains here too as well. We did not put the water storage tanks specifically on here yet because we didn't know exactly where the best place for that is going to be. And that's something that would have to get determined if this development were to go through, because we'd want to be able to place it in a way that would accommodate phasing. Because we know that it's very unlikely for a developer to come in and want to develop the entire subdivision all in one go or have the funding to do so. But we know the utilities are essential to that. And so we would need to place that water storage tank and those pumps up the mountain in a way that would facilitate a phase one development at a high elevation, because we want to use gravity as our friend, get water from that emergency storage tank down to the rest of the subdivision, but not put it just directly at the high point, recognizing that the highest point of that concept subdivision is likely going to be within phase two or a later phase of that development. So that view shed that we just went through, that backed all the way up to the port over here on this side of the city, and that was the view looking at it. And I know that there's been a lot of concern about a potential eyesore, and the roadway will be visible during the winter months when we don't have added tree cover. But you do have a lot of spruce trees on there that will hold their needles a lot of the year, so that will potentially help mitigate that concern. And we were pretty surprised that the topography did a pretty good job of nestling the subdivision right in there. So the number of houses that you could potentially see from here is lower than even I initially anticipated. So just some considerations there. Thank you. So here's the reality of the situation, I will say. We know it's feasible. We know it's doable. It's just a matter of how much it's going to cost. So we did some rough order of magnitude estimates. The cost for getting up the road is about $27 million. There is a 20% contingency on that, and there's serious contingencies built into all of our estimates. For a couple of reasons. One is, again, this is a desktop analysis. We haven't sent a surveyor out to know for sure. So it could go up, it could go down. The other reason for higher contingency is we're assuming this development is a ways in the future, and we're not sure what construction costs and materials are going to be at that time. So we built in that contingency to bump it up and hopefully help us get a better planning level estimate. Interior road subdivisions are cheaper than getting up the mountain because they're not going to require as much blasting or grading work. But for the full build out, that 674 lot, we're looking at about $32 million, again with a 20% contingency included in that. And then all of our utilities, so water, sewer, electric, communication lines, that includes the water storage tanks and booster stations. That's all wrapped up in it. We're looking at about $74 million. This might be a little bit higher than if council members, I know you might have been circulated an earlier version of this report. We did not have the the electrical part of the utility estimate included in that yet. So since that first iteration, we did get that information, which was about $16.5 million. So that increased everything a little bit. And so with that, we're looking at a total estimated development cost, $130 million. But again, this is all based on those very baseline assumptions of residential only at 10,500 square feet a lot, and those are subject to change. And once we get up there and, if additional work is chosen to be explored, get surveyors up there, do wetland delineations, all of this is subject to change. But with that said, it's doable. It is absolutely doable, and the topography up there could support a fairly large development if that is something that's desired. The access to recreation would be, in my opinion, as a planner and just a recreator who loves living and visiting Alaska, it's a huge attraction. It would be great for the potential city users, having opportunities for developed ski areas, bicycle courses, choose your level of development for recreation there. And again, access roads and utilities are essential. It's tough, it's going to be expensive, but there's a way to do it. So with that, I would love to answer any and all questions that you guys have.
Okay, thank you very much. That was eye-opening. Council members, do you have questions for the presenter? Administration, do you have questions for the presenter?
I don't have a question. I do have a statement. That would be acceptable, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
As you heard Terrence state, desktop analysis, and the reason for that is because that's what you authorized, as far as we didn't authorize to actually go on site to do anything more. We just needed the question answer if it's feasible. So, just wanted to state that.
Can I ask a basic question, sir?
Are we willing to suspend the rules just to allow that? We're not going to have a whole lot of back and forth at this point, but go ahead. One question.
I'm just wondering, what's the elevation on that bench where all those houses are?
I believe it's between 700 and 1,000 feet.
Thank you. That's a valid question. We'll be back now. So, thank you very much. I guess that's our presentation. And council, do you want to discuss what we do with this? Council member Castellano.
I'll go ahead and open up. I'm glad that we got this done, because when we have a housing shortage and the word gets out that there's 1,800 acres across the bay, what are we crying about? I'm glad that we've looked at this. I personally love hiking Mount Alice, and I know there's a lot of people out here in the audience. It would be devastating to me personally to see 620 homes right there. It would break my heart. My whole body's quivering right now just thinking about it. I'm just glad. I guess that's all I'll say is I'm glad that we've discussed it. I'm glad we're looking at it. I personally hope that it's nothing that we have to turn to anytime in the near future, but at least we know. I just imagine, there's all kinds of things in the legislative history. I'm a legislative history junkie that I'll pull up and I'll be like, oh, look at this, this is cool. And all of that stuff is really, really helpful when you get into the future, but I think, you know, when we start talking I don't even remember, this many millions of dollars, I would rather see the city start dumping into our utility extensions and helping these developers get housing that's more easily developed. I mean, there are a lot of parcels for sale right now that could be developed, but there's no money. I mean, when you start doing, just like any developer does this math, right? Like, once you start talking about extending utilities and doing all of that, it's kind of a, who wants to make that investment, right? So if the city really wants to step up and start helping, you know, like one of the citizens noted, like, get out there, find out exactly how many lots, how many houses we need, because, sorry to go off on a tangent, I'll stop very soon. I was just talking to somebody the other day, you know, like, these millennials that are now buying homes are bigger than our baby boomers. Our baby boomers can afford really expensive, big homes, but the millennials can't, right? But then the next generation that's gonna come after millennials is gonna be even smaller. So we have a problem right now and we're ringing sirens and bells, but I think one day we'll have too much housing, right? So just trying to, you know, I keep on telling people, like, sure, Seward has a housing problem, but start talking to other communities across the nation. Everybody has a housing problem. And we don't want to react too quick. Like, we just need to be graceful in what we're doing and not do it in a state of panic, I guess. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Other comments from council? Yes, Councilmember Wells.
First of all, I thought that the presentation was incredible, and being able to really get an idea on the layout and how it would actually look. I don't know about all you guys, but I thought that that was pretty impressive. Seeing how the obstruction of view wouldn't be as dramatic as we thought, and the development of you know, more accessibility for people to do outdoor activities. That part's great, obviously, as well. I don't know what developer is going to dump that kind of money into our community to develop it. I would buy one of those lots right now, you know, but there's 640 other people that buy a lot. So I'm glad that we did it. There was a lot of people asking about it, and so instead of the council saying, you know, or people thinking we're just kicking those questions to the curb, I thought it was great that we did that. As far as how many homes we need, I thought that the community development, we had a pretty good idea of how many homes we need. So I'm not sure why. I thought it was like just 125 homes or something like that, and I'm not sure. What was that?
No, I was saying.
Yeah, so I thought that we had a pretty good idea on what that number was, and maybe I'm incorrect, but if we do, that's something that we should bring out. But I just remember talking about that extensively. So that's all I had to say. I thought it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Others? Go ahead. Councilmember Calhoun.
I agree. The presentation was very good. And if we're going to start looking at putting money into infrastructure, especially those kind of numbers, which we just, as a city right now, we don't have those kind of funds. But there are areas that we have funds for that we can start to do that. And some of that's already being done. You know, some of the developable land is already starting to be developed in, you know, to help with some of the issues for housing. And I think that we're going to be much better served, the community will be, if we look at maybe being able to help with that infrastructure extension and funding some of that through whether it's the developer reimbursement program or other sources that we might have, and we can do that. And I think, I don't know if this is the right time to answer a couple of questions, but if people look at the next meeting we have on our legislative priority list, there is infrastructure extension for the bench included on that, plus also inside the city limits on this side too, is already on our list. So we're already taking a look at that. So it's really pretty. It's nice. I don't see it as being, it is feasible to do it. I don't think it's feasible for us to pursue it at this time and put any more money into that right now, because we have projects and things that could use that money much better and help solve any housing issues much quicker. That's all I have.
Thank you. Do the other two of you want to say anything? Councilmember Demas.
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple things. I also want to say thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really, really good. It was nice to be able to look at it with all the visuals. Thank you to administration for responding to everybody saying, what are you going to do about our housing problem? I think, I don't know if we can say, how do we find out how many homes we want or need in Seward, because I think Seward is such an amazing place that if we build 1 million homes, 1 million people would come here. But I think that it's more important to find balance within our housing community and look at vacation rentals, nightly rentals, that type of thing, while we are expanding some of the subdivisions. I agree that I don't think it's time to look into this further, although I don't think that it's something that we have to completely squash. I could see it happening in the future. I could get excited about it. I think it looks like a beautiful place to expand recreating and maybe have some homes up there. It doesn't seem financially feasible right now, so I wouldn't support moving forward with it, but I'm glad we did it. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Osenga, do you want to say anything?
Sure, I would just say pretty much everything's been said already. That I agree, it was a great presentation, thank you. But I also feel that there's really no reason to move forward with this right now. If the cost of it is just so phenomenal that we have other things that we can concentrate on right now and other things that we are actually in the middle of trying to do anyway. So I think that our efforts could be better spent on a little bit smaller endeavors, but also as important.
Thank you. Well, everyone has said everything I was going to say, I believe. We've talked about this for, like you say, 30 years or something. Is it feasible? We found out. Well, we listened to the people, we got the feasibility study done, and we found out, yeah, it is, but it's pricey. And my opinion is it's probably money well spent, because now we've answered the question. And we have this, we can store this, save this, and pull it out sometime in the future. Our money, I mean, we are pursuing development in other areas, and I think that's probably the way to go, and it was a really good presentation. I like that flyby thing. So do we need to have any conclusive vote on this, or do you hear enough from us that we are pretty much in unanimous agreement that we just set it aside for now?
Right. I think that if there was direction to pursue it, it'd be proper to make a motion, but
okay.
Obviously there isn't, so.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else up here have anything to say before I open it to citizen comments again? All right. We have a bit of time here, so citizens, would you like to come up and say anything else about this? I appreciate all of you having been there. Linda, yes, please. Normally, this is a 5-minute time. I don't see a lot of people running up here, so if you really want 5 minutes, you could probably have it. We've got 20 minutes to spare.
I don't need 5 minutes. I thought the presentation was great. I really, the very end where they zoomed back to the boat harbor was impressive, because you really didn't see it. You really couldn't see it. It wasn't as ugly as I think people were thinking it would be. The couple of thoughts that I had are that you can put in treatment plants in a house, septic treatment plants in individual housing. And that may be something that would make more sense in the long run. It may be more cost affordable, maybe there's funding for that, I don't know. That's one thing. And then the other thing is desalination may be another way to go in terms of water, getting water. Because I don't know, I don't know, does this water that we've got right here that you're pumping throughout town, if you tie into it, do you have enough flow to serve another 1,200, 1,500 people? But you've got water right there at the bottom of the hill. So that was just another thought I had. I have some other thoughts, but I think I'm going to share them privately tomorrow. Because I think it was great. Is it feasible? Yeah. With a lot of money, if money was never an object, sure, it's feasible. Is it realistic? Probably not.
Thank you, Linda. Does anyone else wish to comment? Yes, come on up, and you need to state your name and inside your house.
Point of order.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So we're still in the committee of the
Oh,
whole.
do we have to come
If you
out?
want to end the committee of the whole, and then they can do an official citizen comment for
Oh,
the record.
I'm sorry. So this is too new to me.
But
Okay.
you're welcome to continue in the committee of the
Okay.
whole and keep the discussion going.
Can we discuss?
Well, I would like these comments to be relative to what we just did. So can we stay within the committee and have these comments? Is that all right with?
And then we'll have comments after this.
Well, yeah, but I think people, well, hopefully they'll realize. I'd rather have it pertain to this if that's possible. Is that agreed? Okay, go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Ben Smith, outside city limits, and this was a conversation that we looked at a little while ago in the PACAB board and discussed it some there. I would like to kind of point out that if you look at the lower 48, there's a lot of areas that were kind of considered undevelopable and infeasible, and then you see that they were developed. And also we have a community, Low Point, where that road was cut in. I know it was a different day and age, but that road was put there, to establish that community out there, and we see how that's really thriving, and we're going to need to look somewhere. This is a very interesting area for a couple of reasons. That it'll have good viewscape. It's kind of hidden. There's not much else up the valley that I can identify that would support that size of a community. So. It's exciting to see these sorts of discussions go forth. I did have kind of a question, though, about the access roads. It was mentioned that you were required to have two. Well, there's only one road going out there, so how does that impact that development? It would be very isolated, just like we saw with the community to the south of us here this summer. So, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. McDonald, relative to this discussion.
Of course. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Are you mayor yet?
Not quite.
Congratulations. Well, nobody's mentioned the fact yet that at 700 to 1,000 foot elevation, it's going to be pretty, anybody that's lived a few winters in Seward, it's going to be pretty darn rough up there. I'm talking a lot of wind, a lot of snow. Those roads are going to be cut off intermittently. So, I guess it's just the same as the other 60% of the houses we got in Seward that are owned by people that don't live here and don't vote here. They're just summer homes. In that thing, it's good. I think what the old-time Sewardites, myself included, are really worried about, we're all hikers of the trail, which is not far off the Mount Alice Trail, which goes all the way up, and you're overlooking the beautiful valley, and there's caves in the side of the crevasses and stuff like that, and you can see mountain goats in the distance, and usually see bear sign around and stuff, and they're worried about it affecting that, and I'm worried about it too. I'm just looking, it's like, I see the problem. Other than that, and everybody's looking around, there's really no answers. Seward is, as the mariners say, constrained by her draft. You don't have any more land. There's, that parcel, the campground at Forest Acres should be turned into high-density housing. The parcel that's right next to it that's for sale on the Seward Highway should be turned into high-density housing. They're of several acres. You can't really go on the other side there, but, there's a couple big parcels on Nash Road, like I said, the Darling property and that like that. So, you've got another couple hundred units just on the private thing that's just waiting to be developed, minimum. But other than that, the only land you have inside city limits is wetlands. and that mountain. And the only real democratic answer I see is that we get more housing at the same time that we get more votes by annexing to Mile 8. And that is a answer to the housing crisis, and I think it's very important that we look at all these problems kind of go together. We don't have any new blood. I think, you know, after seeing the limitations of the volunteer system, I think we need a hard mayor system, you know, that's actually full-time city manager of the city, and we choose them because of their qualifications, whether they be engineers or what, but we need some professional, forward-looking, full-time thing on this to manage what we have. You know, all our systems are 100-year-old systems, whether it's the sewage systems or whether it's our city limits boundaries. And none of them work, or at least they're not going to work in the future to handle the growth. We're an escape city. You know, thousands and thousands of people want to move here if we have the infrastructure and the housing, which we don't. That's why they don't move here. So, annex, get the people, get the votes, and like I said, co-opt the utility. Get this town squared away, Skipper.
Thank you. Any other comments relative to the SMIC bench deal? Okay, I'll move us out of the committee of the whole now. And we're at the, I guess we could have more citizen comments if you need, but we've only got about 10 minutes. Ms. Paquette.
Lynn Paquette, Outside City Limits. I just feel the need to clarify something. The road that went out to Low Point so the city could have their septic system on Low Point. That's why the road went, not to develop a community. The community came after. So just technical.
Thank you. Other citizens' comments? Okay, that brings us to council and administrative comments. And administration, you got comments?
No further comments, thank you.
Okay, council members, I'll start with Mr. Wells.
No further comment.
Mr. Calhoun.
No.
Councilmember Casagrande.
Thank you, everyone, presentation, everyone that showed up. It's good to see the room filling up.
Councilmember DeMoss.
I also wanted to say thank you for everyone that showed up, and to just go on the city webpage on the front page where it says City Council, and if you click on that little button, you'll see all of the agendas and packets for what we're talking about. So I know a lot of times stuff comes out on social media like the day it's happening, because that's when people get the news, but it's always better if people know ahead of time. So just as a reminder, just try to keep up with what we're doing.
Thank you. Councilmember Osenga.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. It was good. Thanks for all the comments from the community, and be safe out there.
Okay, and I also want to thank you for coming out. We heard you, and I hope you realize that we reacted to that. I have to tell you that my dad used to say that closest thing, he didn't believe in heaven, but the closest thing to heaven was sitting up there right so you could look down at the goat caves. And so, you know, we really love Mount Alice and the trails. So with that, I will adjourn this special city council meeting at 6:41. And we will re-meet at 7.